The red-blue divide shifted this year. According to the Washington Post, nearly 700 counties that twice voted for President Obama flipped this time and voted for Donald Trump. Enough of those voters were located in the Midwest battleground states to shift the presidency from blue to red, even though blue got more votes. Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. Democrats in the United States Senate got more votes than Republicans, but it still left the Democrats in the minority in the Senate. Democrats in the House of Representatives got more votes than Republicans, but it still left them in the minority there. Joining us now, Sean McElwee, a policy analyst for Demos Action, and Patrick Thornton, the Senior Director of User Experience and Strategy at CQ Roll Call. Sean, what do you see as the various strata of the Trump vote? One of the things that drives me nuts about this discussion is people will say it's nothing but the racist vote, or it is not the racist vote, like there's one vote. It's like soil. There are different layers, and there's a racist vote in there, and there are other votes, but one of the interesting votes in there is former Obama voters for Trump.
Absolutely. And the way that I argue about this is that what we have seen is the culmination of a 50-year effort by the Republican Party to weld together a plutocratic agenda with white racial anxiety. They have told white Americans that the economic dislocation that you're feeling in your community is due to immigrants, and that any government programs to solve these problems will only benefit people of color, African Americans and Latinos, and not white Americans. And what my research showed is that if white people believe that they're losing jobs and they're losing economic ground to people of color, they are far more likely to support Trump, even if they were previously Democrats, even if they're women, even if they're college educated. And,
you know, polls never really go straight at it and say, are you a racist? Because they know they wouldn't get, you get a 99% no. But there's various ways there are indicators that you find in the data. What are some of the indicators you found?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we use is something called racial resentment. We ask, other groups have gotten ahead. Do African Americans just need to work harder and try harder? Has discrimination held African Americans back? And the other is just stereotyping. Are white people, are African Americans lazier and more violent than white people? And a disturbing number of Americans will say yes.
And the ones who say yes, African Americans are lazier and more violent, are disproportionately represented in the Republican and the Trump vote.
Absolutely. And this survey was actually done at a time before the primary decided. And we can see even within the Republican Party, the most likely to stereotype, the most likely to have racial resentment are far more supportive of Trump.
Of Trump and not John Kasich, for example,
Absolutely.
Even with the party. Patrick Thornton, what do you see when you look at this tapestry?
Well, I think a lot of what Sean is describing is kind of like the what of what is going on, and I'm trying to look at, you know, how did this happen? And a lot of what I've seen, especially in my native state of Ohio, I come from a more rural part of Ohio, is a lot of voters and a lot of people there have not had that much experience with people of different backgrounds. So the county I come from is 97% white. And that's not the whitest county in Ohio. You got some counties down in Appalachia where Trump just cleaned up that are 98, 99% white. And a lot of it really isn't so much that they are deliberately trying to be racist or bigoted, but they ended up voting for a candidate who is deliberately racist or bigoted because they may not know that many people of different backgrounds. And so when you see immigrants of different backgrounds being scapegoated, for them, a lot of times they may not really realize how offensive that is, or they might not fully realize that maybe their issues that they're dealing with have nothing to do with that.
And Patrick, is it also a factor that people growing up in these all-white communities don't recognize the sting in a lot of Trump's language? They don't realize how hurtful some of his statements and some of his attacks have been, including the attack on President Obama's birth.
Yeah, I think 100% that they don't realize it. And I think a lot of them did not fully grasp that just because you might have disagreements with either Hillary Clinton or Obama's economic policies, that doesn't necessarily mean you can excuse the other things that Trump has said and done. And so when I hear from a lot of different people around the country, a lot of different minorities, they tell me that that's exactly it, that they don't understand how these people could have supported somebody who has been so openly racist and bigoted towards so many different groups. And I think a lot of that really is just a lack of empathy towards people they have not really met or interacted with. And I don't think for many of them, there are some people who are legitimately, rather racist and bigoted. But the vast majority of Trump supporters, a lot of these people in the whiter parts of the Midwest, they're not intentionally trying to be that, but it's just a lack of, I think, experience with other people and empathy that sometimes leads them to not understand how revolting Donald Trump is to so many different Americans.
And Sean, even with all that, what we always have to remember in these discussions is Hillary Clinton got more votes. She got more votes. And it is simply the accident of distribution and what has become the modern madness of the Electoral College that means the person with the most votes can now lose.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But what I do think that we need to talk about is the fact that labor unions, which are a traditional bastion of working class mobilization and often can bring people of the working class across race and gender together, have become incredibly weak. And in Nevada,
and labor unions are communicators. Labor unions historically did a lot of communication among these groups.
Absolutely. They create the solidarity that it takes, and they create a mobilization. Look at Nevada, where you had the AFL-CIO knock on 300,000 doors, and now you have the first Latina in the Senate. So I do not think that this is a question of, oh, we have to win back only the white working class. We have to win back the working class across race and gender lines.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back.
I know it is not a sexy issue, and I know the media doesn't cover it, but trade policy, whether it's NAFTA or CAFTA or permanent normal trade relations with China, are enormously important issues.
Patrick Thornton, I wanted to show Bernie Sanders talking about NAFTA, and I wish we had some video of him where he's angrily ranting against it. Last year, we ran some video back-to-back of Donald Trump talking about NAFTA, Bernie talking about NAFTA. You could not tell the difference. And in these Midwest battleground states, NAFTA was a huge issue, and it seemed like Hillary Clinton got saddled as the NAFTA candidate, even though she did not vote for it, had nothing to do with it. She was first lady when NAFTA went through. But it seemed like Bernie Sanders found the way to talk to those voters about that kind of issue.
Yeah, he definitely tapped into that a little bit differently, and I think there was also a failure on either side, really. I mean, the Republican Party has certainly been more traditionally pro-trade than the Democrats to actually defend, trade, and I think that left, Clinton a little bit vulnerable. But one of the things I think Clinton didn't really do a particularly good job either is talking about a lot of these jobs the factories and jobs that have left Ohio and other parts of the Midwest haven't gone to Mexico or Canada. They've gone to Alabama. They've gone to Texas. They've gone to these right-to-work states. And that gets back to the union discussion we had earlier about how unionization is dropping in a lot of this country, and a lot of the industrial Midwest. So there was not a very robust discussion about A, maybe how trade has benefited the United States, but B, how a lot of these jobs are not either being left or lost because of NAFTA or other trade agreements, or are not being lost for or being lost for other reasons. A lot of factories now have a lot more automation and robotics going on, which means that there's just a lot less jobs to be had for the same economic output. And you look at American manufacturing actually has quite a bit of a robust output right now, and that has nothing to do with NAFTA. It has everything to do with much more modern manufacturing processes that rely much heavier on robotics, and that was just never discussed, and I'm not really sure why that was never really articulated from either side.
And Sean, you never heard Donald Trump railing against, or Bernie Sanders railing against, the Toyota plants that have located here and the BMW plants that have located in this country. Patrick is right. International trade is both the most complex subject that government deals with, and yet the most important subject to voters who aren't fully equipped to see that whole picture. So there has to be a way to talk to them. Absolutely.
Let's take Arizona. In Arizona, there was paid sick leave and a higher minimum wage on the ballot, and that won 58% of the vote. Clinton won 45% of the vote. So there were a lot of voters who went out and said, I want minimum wages and I want paid sick leave, but didn't translate that into the Democratic Party. I was looking at ads from Q-Win. He was the first Latino to represent Nevada, and he ran ads talking about expanding Social Security. talked about the minimum wage. He talked about working families. I think you definitely need to see more of this, and you need to see more mobilization.
First thing President Obama said today about how to talk to these voters was minimum wage. And yet those very same voters voted for a minimum wage and then for the Republican candidate. We're going to have to leave it there. Sean McElwee and Patrick Thornton, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Still ahead, Tavis